You invite things into your home all the time. A piece of furniture, an antique, a gift. But what if one of those things isn't just an object? What if it's a doorway? We bought a bunk bed for our kids, and we invited a demon to walk right through it. My name is Alan. Back in the winter of 1987, my wife, Debbie, and I lived a quiet life with our kids in Horicon, Wisconsin. It was a peaceful, normal existence. We needed a bed for our 2 young daughters, so we bought a used bunk bed from a second-hand shop. It seemed like a great deal. It was sturdy, made of dark wood, and the price was right. We brought it home, set it up in the kids' room, and tucked them in for the night. That was our first mistake. The very first night we assembled that bed, everything changed. Our toddler, sleeping soundly in the bottom bunk, woke up screaming with a fever so high the doctors were alarmed. It was a violent, sudden illness that had no discernible cause. They ran tests, found nothing, and sent us home with Tylenol and worried looks. A few days later, our older daughter, sleeping in the top bunk, came down with a severe respiratory infection, her breathing becoming ragged overnight. We chalked it up to a terrible coincidence. A bad flu season. Kids get sick, but as they recovered, the house itself seemed to fall ill. It began with the radio in the kitchen. It would switch stations on its own, which was strange enough, but then it got specific. One afternoon, Debbie was washing dishes, and the radio, which was tuned to a soft rock station, suddenly blasted static. Then, through the static, a man's voice, like an old-time announcer, clearly said the word, "Pray." Then it snapped back to the music. Debbie thought she was losing her mind, but it was the start of the house talking to us. Then the kids started seeing an old woman in their room. They called her the witch. They said she had long, stringy black hair, a pale, wrinkled face, and a horrible smile. They claimed she would just stand in the corner, watching them from the shadows. Soon, it wasn't just the corner. Our oldest said she saw the woman peering out of the closet, just her glowing eyes visible in the dark. Our youngest refused to sleep without the light on, saying the witch would whisper her name from under the bed. They were terrified to sleep in that room. Of course, we searched the room. We looked in the closets, under the bed. Nothing. We told them it was just nightmares, but we were lying to them, and to ourselves. The air in that room felt different. Heavy. Cold. It had the faint, sickly sweet smell of decay like old, wet leaves. Then it started coming for me. I was working in the basement, organizing my tools, when I heard a voice whisper right in my ear. It was a gravelly, low voice, and it said, "Come here." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. I was the only one home. The kids were at school, Debbie was at the store. I dropped my wrench, the clang echoing in the dead silence. I ran upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest, and locked the door behind me. From that moment on, I knew we weren't alone. The activity grew bolder, more aggressive. The garage door would open and slam shut on its own, over and over, sometimes for hours in the dead of night, waking the whole neighborhood. I'd come home from my night shift to find every single kitchen cabinet and drawer wide open, as if someone had frantically searched for something. Empty chairs would rock back and forth in the living room. It was psychological warfare. It was designed to make us feel like we were going crazy. The stress was immense. Debbie and I started fighting, arguing over whether we were imagining things. Our family was fraying at the seams. One night, Debbie and I saw fog materialize in the living room. It was thick and orange, and it swirled near the ceiling like smoke. But there was no fire. It had no heat, no smell. It just was. A moment later, it vanished. We clung to our sanity by a thread. The breaking point came a few weeks later. I was downstairs when I heard the kids screaming bloody murder. I bolted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. I burst into their room, and they were pointing at the bunk bed, their faces pale with terror. They said they saw flames shooting out of the headboard, but there was no smoke, no heat, just the horrifying image of a fire that wasn't there. Whatever was in our house, it was centered on that bed. We were desperate. We brought in our pastor. He was a good man, but a practical one, and I could tell he was skeptical. He agreed to bless the house, probably just to calm our nerves. He stood in the living room and began to pray. The moment the words left his lips, a freezing, cold wind blew through the sealed house. The lights flickered violently. As he continued, walking towards the kids' room, the entity fought back. A disembodied voice screamed from inside the empty room. It wasn't a whisper. It was a guttural roar, and it bellowed, "Get out!" The pastor froze, his Bible trembling in his hand. He looked at us, his face ashen. He told us he felt a powerful, evil presence, and that we needed to get our family out of that house immediately. We didn't need to be told twice. That very night, we packed a few bags, grabbed the children, and fled to a relative's house. We left everything behind: the furniture, the toys, the clothes, and the bunk bed. We put the bed in storage, thinking our problem was solved. The activity stopped. The house was quiet. We eventually moved back in, and for months there was peace. But the evil wasn't gone. It was just waiting. We eventually decided to bring the bunk bed back to the house to burn it, to destroy it once and for all. The moment we moved it from storage and set it in the garage, the haunting began again. But this time, it was 100 times worse. It was done playing games. I was sleeping on the couch, exhausted, when I was jolted awake by an overwhelming sense of dread, a primal fear that paralyzes you. I looked towards the hallway, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't a ghost or a shadow anymore. Standing there was a figure, tall and grotesque. It had the shape of a man, but it was all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its skin was pale and tight, like parchment. Its eyes glowed like hot coals, and its face was twisted in a permanent, horrifying grin, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. It was the demon from the bed. It took a step towards me, and a voice echoed in my head, not through my ears, but inside my mind. It said, "You're dead." I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I was completely paralyzed. All I could do was stare as it began to drift towards me. I screamed, but no sound came out. Debbie ran into the room, flicked on the light, and it vanished. We both stood there, shaking. We grabbed the kids and ran out of that house for the last time, not even stopping to close the door. We drove away and never looked back. We burned the bunk bed the next day. As it went up in flames, the wood seemed to scream, a high-pitched wail that was drowned out by the roar of the fire. For 20 years, we lived in peace. We moved to a new town, started over. We never spoke of what happened in Horicon. I truly believed that when we burned that bed, we had burned the demon that came with it. But about a decade ago, small things started happening in our new house. A cup falling off a shelf on its own. The faint sound of whispers from an empty room. My wife saw a shadow dart across the hallway just out of the corner of her eye. We explained it all away. Old house, the wind, our minds playing tricks on us. We had to, because the alternative was unthinkable. The horrible realization slowly dawned on me. What if the bed was never the source of the evil? What if it was just an amplifier? A magnet for something that was already following us, attached to our family, drawn to our fear. We burned the doorway, but we never got rid of the thing that had walked through it. It's just learned to be quiet. It's learned to wait. Be careful what you bring into your home. Every object has a history, a life before you. And you never know when you're not just buying a piece of furniture, but inheriting the nightmare that comes with it.